Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So the last few days have provided an absolute ton of information to us around Path of Exile 2. Also, potential beta release schedules, that they're going to stick to that schedule, couch co-op, console compatibility, crossplay, everything else in between. These are all great features. But with these features, there are potential issues. And this leads to not all good news will be sought from every situation in this release. There's going to be a few things that are going to maybe not be as good. Now, if anyone's across recent news regarding Sony, there's a massive challenge faced by the Helldivers community over the required linking to PSN accounts post-launch. This resulted in around 170 countries being delisted, that meaning those players who had purchased Helldivers 2 in any of those countries were unable to play Helldivers 2 because of the requirement for PlayStation, the PlayStation Network account, or the PSN account. And essentially this ostracized a whole heap of players from being able to have fun with a game that they were absolutely enjoying. It's a fantastic game as well. POE 2 won't have this issue specifically as far as we know. And the reason why is because PSN is for PlayStation specific titles and Arrowhead Studios is a developer studio that sits underneath Sony. So there was no other requirement, or there was no other leniency outside of that until the community barked up to push back on having the mandatory linking of a PSN account. So what in blue blazes does this have to do with PoE 2 in any way, shape or form? Well, let me explain. So as a result of the event over the weekend, some interviews have taken place. In particular, this one is from VG247, and it looks at Path of Exile 2 PlayStation Plus requirements, not the hope of the developers, but it looks like it might be unavoidable for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 players, and we'll talk through this article in a little more detail. So according to Jonathan Rogers, who's the game director for Path of Exile 2, the PlayStation Plus requirement for PS4 and PS5 players is not something they're keen on, but when we read down further, it's very likely that it will be required. So he mentions so that it is not their hope that it will be required. It's something that they believe should be okay without having a subscription later, but they can't commit to that because ultimately it's one of those things that they are in negotiations of at the moment. And it very much is a let's see what happens situation. Now, they were further asked whether PlayStation players could expect an extra in-game incentive if they do have to pay for the monthly subscription to play Path of Exile 2 online. Rogers responded with, ultimately, they haven't thought about that. We'll have to see when we get to it. Essentially, they can't comment on that. They don't know what the situation is. And it's very likely that for anyone who does have a PlayStation, you will be required to play the PlayStation Plus subscription to be able to access the game online, which is pretty standard for most PlayStation games, but it's a little disappointing considering it is a free-to-play game. Now, the next question that was asked is whether or not they will be able to commit to carrying over Path of Exile 1 microtransactions. This seems to be more complicated in the more that we think about this situation. So they're not really giving any real specifics about this and how this is going to work at this stage. The reason why this is a complicated topic, simplistically put, is if you buy your microtransactions on one platform, they're going to charge their surcharge or percentage margin on that platform. So if then you're allowed to carry over those transactions on your account to another entirely different platform, that creates a new complication. So let's say it's from like Xbox or from Steam to PSN. Now, PSN wants to make their cut, right? So, or PlayStation or Sony, whoever you want to refer to them as. So there's going to be negotiable differences or costs that are going to have to be compensated for, because from the way that corporate environments now work in gaming, everybody's got to make money. And that's basically what this sort of alludes to in this article so far as we read. So reading on, Jonathan mentions here that they don't want to talk too much about specifics right now. They're going to make purchase carryovers on their platform, or they're going to make it happen to the greatest extent that they can possibly do it. But they will inevitably end up with troubles with negotiations, and there are definitely some barriers between platform holders wanting to do that at all. As I mentioned, money talks in the corporate world of video games now. Their policy is we're going to fight as hard as we can to carry over all that can be carried over. I don't think there will be any problems on some platforms, while others there is definitely going to need to be some convincing. Rogers also specifically will not point out any platform owners that are more difficult in this respect and are being more troublesome in these negotiations. This is very likely covered under an NDA, and they're going to want to avoid any legal action should they make any disparaging comments or those that could be perceived as. Rogers has also outlined here that for any PoE 1 players wishing to transfer your purchases over on the same platform, there should be relatively no issues. So PC to PC, Steam to Steam, even on PlayStation to PlayStation, Microsoft to Microsoft. But it's where, as I noted earlier, the complication is going to come in when you try and do it, i.e. PlayStation to Microsoft, Microsoft to Steam. Finally, down here is simply notes that when it comes to cross-platform monetization, there is more of a minefield at play, and they will try and alleviate the pressures as best they can, but it ultimately comes down to the policy of the platform holders at the end of the day. So is this good news or is this bad news? Well, it's good and bad. They are barracking in the favor of the community and trying to get what they can, but ultimately companies that operate in a very corporatized environment, i.e. what we've just seen with the behavior from Sony and even Microsoft and many others around, are definitely not going to like this approach. The problem here is the ethics that GGG operates on is like a gamer mentality. They're trying to make a really good game. And unfortunately, the way the market currently is stacked is many companies, for those games that do want to excel, are very focused on money and return and profit and less focused on putting out a quality product, as we've seen of the last, most likely the best part of 10 years. It's really just a profit drive, and this is a really good thing that GGG is doing and trying to really, give value for money to the community in this effort, but ultimately they are going to encounter issues and there are going to be compromises along the way. I don't think this is something that the community should be holding against GGG. They're trying to do the right thing here, but inevitably they are going to have to make some decisions, and it's going to result in some people losing, and that's just the way the situation's most likely going to play out. Anyway, if you like videos like this and you want to see more news as it comes up like this, articulated in a relatively short format, let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, I stream almost every other night, so follow me over on Twitch. Anyway, I'll see you guys later, and have a good one.